Hey guys, so a pretty frequent question I get during my streams is when is the buff for Bad Juju and Thorn coming? The answer is I don't know. Thanks for watching everyone, I'll see you next time. Alright, well a related question at least is how do you think Thorn and Bad Juju need to be buffed? So let's actually talk about that. We'll start with Thorn. Thorn is not in a great place right now PvE wise. A big draw of Thorn is supposed to be its damage over time component, which is great for PvP. 2 headshots will definitely kill the target, 3 body shots will 99% of the time kill a target. However, in PvE, the damage over time component is very lackluster for 2 reasons. 1, most critical hits on the lower tier enemies, the Dregs, Vandals, Goblins, Hobgoblins, will one-shot them, so the damage over time component is never utilized. And 2, if the damage over time component is actually used, it's not that much damage. I'm not actually sure if a crit with Thorn on hard mode in Vault of Glass will kill a goblin with 1 shot because of the damage over time, but even if that was the case, I'd still probably use something like Hawkmoon because of the magazine, and because of Hawkmoon's random bonus damage providing an average of 2 to 3 one-shots of goblins and hobgoblins per full magazine use. That tells you what kind of place Thorn is in right now for PvE. Hard mode would be the only time I would consider using Thorn in PvE if it was indeed a one-shot crit with the damage over time, and even then I wouldn't use it. For the problem of one-shotting enemies, Thorn falls behind literally any hand cannon with a larger ammo capacity. It only has 6 shots in the chamber, so you're going to end up reloading a lot. If my Hawkmoon or even my Devil You Know can also one-shot a lot of enemies, and they have double the amount of rounds compared to Thorn, why would I ever use Thorn? I'm just going to use something with a high ammo capacity so I'll spend more time shooting and less time reloading. Speaking of reloads, Thorn is horribly slow to reload, one of the slowest reloading hand cannons in the game. For a gun with only 6 shots, you'd think it'd have a much faster reload than it does. Hell, Hawkmoon and Devil You Know have double the amount of shots and a faster reload than Thorn does. Thorn's low ammo count could be excused with a very fast reload, but given it has one of the slowest reload times in the game, it makes it not very good. In PvP, Thorn is okay strictly because of the damage over time component, but once again suffers from the very slow reload and only having 6 shots. You'll have to reload after every single instance of a fight. If you see a guy running and maybe you pop 2 or 3 shots on them, you have to reload before going anywhere compared to, say, Hawkmoon, where you'll have another 10 or 11 shots ready, or any other comparable hand cannon like Devil You Know, Lord High Fixer, or whatever. It just slows you down too much for the fast-paced nature of the Crucible, especially given the size of a lot of the maps. You have to treat it like a scout rifle much more than you'd have to treat any other hand cannons like a scout rifle. So what can Thorn get that will buff it to levels comparable to other exotics in the game? Well, I think there's a few options available. They could increase the number of shots from 6 to something like 9 or 10, giving that slow reload some justification. They could speed up the reload a considerable amount, and maybe increase the number of shots to 7 or 8, I like 8. An interesting change, I think, would be to make the damage over time stack in PvE, not PvP. Right now, the damage over time does not stack, it just refreshes on every shot. I think if the initial dot was decreased in damage, but then increased as you landed more shots, it would be more rewarding on boss fights, especially if you could keep the dot rolling. Obviously, this would need to be done in a very fine way to prevent raid groups from just all using Thorn and bringing down bosses very quickly, as interesting of a strategy that might be. To clarify, the dot you generate from Thorn would remain individual to you. You wouldn't be able to have 6 Thorns shooting at a boss and have the dot stacked to ridiculous numbers, nor would we want to have the dot stack uncontrollably. I don't want Destiny to turn everyone into a mage rolling ignites. Thorn needs one of those buffs in order to at least bring it in line with other exotics. There's just no reason to use it right now in PvE. In PvP, it's nothing more than an alright weapon having its moments at medium to long range and netting you at best a kill and at worst a post-mortem kill, but it is still outclassed by other hand cannons, not to mention other weapons in general. Moving on to Bad Juju. Bad Juju is bad, but not as bad as I once thought. I had heard that sometimes the instant reload wouldn't happen, which is the entire point of the gun existing. The first upgrade, which is the bonus accuracy when hip firing, is total crap, but with the second upgrade, String of Curses, it actually made the gun usable. Don't get me wrong, until you get that bonus, the weapon is painfully bad. Like, really bad, and if you want to level it, I strongly suggest leveling it up with bounties and not through actual use. I don't like the full auto upgrade either, partly because a lot of the time it doesn't feel like it works, but you shouldn't be really using this thing in full auto mode anyway. But when I finally got String of Curses, it wasn't as bad as I thought it would be. It's an okay weapon for just everyday solo stuff like bounties or the daily, but outside of solo play is when the weapon really starts to falter because unless you're getting every killing blow on every enemy, String of Curses is worthless. The entire point of the weapon is to never have to reload, and when you're solo, you get all the kills to yourself, provided that you can kill an enemy within the 15 shot limit. So when I did my bounties, I rarely had to reload. It really keeps me going. A problem with Bad Juju is that it's a pulse rifle as well, and pulse rifles are not in a good spot in PvE. It's generally a lot harder to control a pulse rifle's recoil than it is other weapons. You want to be aiming for crits, and it's harder to make sure all of your shots from a pulse rifle are crits due to the recoil. The range and realistic range of pulse rifles is also really bad because the farther your target, the worse your recoil, making it harder and harder to land critical shots on faraway targets. This is why you see hand cannons and scout rifles kind of being the top weapons for PvE content right now. You can control your situations a lot better, and you have a little more time to line up your shots. In PvP, this weapon is absolutely terrible. The damage on it is already incredibly low on a per shot basis, taking most of the magazine to kill someone. Yeah, you'll get some String of Curses activations, but you'll probably lose a lot more fights than you win, and there are plenty of weapons that are much better and much easier to use in Crucible. I'm not saying it's impossible to succeed with this weapon in Crucible, but there are certainly much better options. I'd say that even the Stranger's Rifle, the weapon that you get for beating the Black Garden, is better in PvP than Bad Juju. But you know what? I think that's okay, because some weapons are going to be better for certain activities over others. The biggest problem with Bad Juju is that I think it's very difficult to buff this weapon because of String of Curses. Think about it. If you raise the amount of shots in the magazine, then you have too many opportunities to get a kill on an enemy to refresh your ammo. It becomes too easy to get a kill. If you increase the damage, then once again it becomes too easy to kill enemies. You get String of Curses all the time without as much effort as it takes now. But in team play, it needs one or both of those buffs to make it even viable to use over other weapons, or even on the same terms as other weapons. Damage and magazine are Bad Juju's biggest weaknesses, but if you buff either of them, you make the weapon too easy to use or too efficient when it performs best in solo scenarios. But you'd at least make it usable in other modes of play, which I think would be acceptable. I think one or the other will end up getting buffed, possibly even both. Maybe something like a 10% damage buff and an increase from 15 to 18 shots would do Bad Juju some justice, or would be a good starting point. I'd also like to see that hipfire bonus swapped for something that fits this weapon a little bit better. Maybe something like Zen Moment would make landing shots a little bit easier. Anyway, those are my thoughts on Thorn and Bad Juju in how I think they need buffs. Their buffs are supposedly coming in the next big patch. We just don't know when that big patch is coming yet, so keep on holding on to those weapons, toss them in your bank for now, and we'll just have to wait and see. Thanks for watching, guys, and I'll see you next time.